What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Leadership Download. My name is Travis, and I'm here with my friend Cameron. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. So today we're going to talk about the subject of feedback. Specifically, what we want to talk about is this idea of negative feedback. You know, as leaders, we are constantly being tasked with having to deal with feedback. In fact, one of the things that I would say is basically a necessity of being a leader is that we must get comfortable with constantly hearing things that we don't necessarily want to hear. You know, our abilities to improve, our abilities to get better are often going to come through this track of of listening to things, hearing feedback that sometimes maybe is not the best or the thing we want to hear. And I love what John Maxwell talks about when he talks about feedback. He says, we want feedback to help us, not hurt us. But most of the time, unfortunately, we view feedback, especially negative feedback, in a negative way. Especially younger leaders have a hard time hearing and accepting feedback. So obviously, this whole idea of accepting feedback is something that we all struggle with, but it's especially something that young leaders tend to struggle with. So for us to kind of start unpacking this idea of why feedback matters in the first place, there's a couple of thoughts I want to give you of why feedback matters. So why does feedback matter? Number one is I'd say you need feedback because we don't see things the way others see things. And another way of saying this was say, I don't see myself the same way that other people see me. So we need to have someone else come in to help us have this whole picture of who we are, because we don't see the same image as someone else may see of ourselves. The second thing is you cannot fix what you are not aware of. We all have blind spots. We all have challenges in our lives. We all have things that we don't see, that we don't naturally know about ourselves, and we need someone to help us bring about clarity in those spots. The third thing is we have to start seeing feedback as a positive thing. So we're realizing that we need that feedback because we don't see ourselves the way others sees us. We have blind spots, so there's certain things we don't see about ourselves that someone else can see. And we need to view feedback as a positive and good thing. The fourth thing, and lastly, I want to just add in there is, feedback is the way we develop good ideas and improve ourselves. So when we ask someone for feedback, when we seek for knowledge from other people, we are able to grow ourselves and become a better version of ourselves. Cameron, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, feedback is what helps us get better at leaders, and it's so important to be able to receive feedback and give feedback properly and in a positive manner. And this is something that I struggle with as well as being a young leader, where people try to undermine my ability and effectiveness as a leader. And feedback, as you mentioned, can be something to help you become a better leader. You mentioned blind spots. That's so critical in our leadership, is to be able to go to those people that you trust. It could be your boss. It could be people at your level. It could be people that you lead, that you trust, and say, hey, how am I doing? How are things going? Is there anything that I can improve upon? And it's the only reason why you want that is to help yourself get better. And you want to start seeing feedback as a good thing and start getting ideas from people around you on how you can get better. Because if, just like Craig Groeschel says, if the leader, I forgot what that saying was, forgot. It says something about if, the leader always getting better. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I think I remember the one you're talking about. Absolutely. An interesting thing I like to put it, when we talk about this idea of feedback, it's our ability to be able to listen, and another quote that Andy Stanley has is, a leader who doesn't listen soon has a team that has nothing to say. So if we don't get comfortable with this idea of feedback, even when we're the senior leader or we're the most experienced person in the room, if we don't get comfortable with allowing people to provide us feedback, then we ultimately will have a bunch of people around us who have nothing of much to say. And honestly, people who don't add value to you tend to not be the best employees to have around. Really, so
you make a good point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you make a good point on that, because listening is so important. And that's something that I've experienced as well, as where your leaders are so quick to speak, but their ears are not open. And I've heard this saying multiple times is, you want to mouth closed, ears open. And that's sort of I'm in a new environment right now. And that's my approach right now. I'm not saying a lot, but I'm just listening to all the feedback on, and that changes the perspective of the team members. Like, okay, you're actually listening to me because you want to hear from me so that you can make that proper change and make the workplace better for everyone.
Absolutely. I love that quote by Peter Drucker that says, when he would go in and consult in a business, right? So here you got like the most, one of the most powerful minds in management ever, and here he's saying that his greatest tool when he walked into a business to do consulting would be to become a person of ignorance and ask questions and listen. So here you got like this guy who could probably solve almost all your problems through just through the knowledge he has. But he says, what, the first thing you should do is go in there with an ignorant mindset and ask questions and have that ability to learn and then receive the feedback and work through that. So second thing that really we wanted to talk about is, so we know that feedback is important to us, but often when we get negative feedback, when we have feedback come towards us that's not necessarily positive, how do we take that feedback and use it in a productive way? And the first point I want to share is probably the one that I still struggle with the most, but it's probably the most important. And it's don't take it personally. One of the worst things we can do when we have a great relationship with someone, and we have a solid trusting relationship with someone, and they provide us some sort of negative feedback, is to take it personally. I love what John Maxwell talks about when he talks about, feedback is, we have to learn to get over ourselves quickly, and we have to use feedback to help ourselves grow and not get offended or get offensive or defensive by it. So that idea is we have to get over ourselves and take our pride out of the game and say, look, don't take any of this personal, because our growth is going to be dependent on our ability to be able to take this and grow from it and not internalize it and cause us internal grief. The second thing I really want to say is realize that we are not good or have grown out of feedback. Like, we will never get to a point in our lives or even on a specific subject or a specific task that we will ever find ourselves in a position where we will not need feedback anymore. The greatest managers, the greatest leaders, the greatest speakers still often desire to take feedback and to grow from it. They don't believe they have reached a summit in their career or in their leadership or in their life where they feel like feedback is no longer valuable to them.
Yeah, Travis, just wanted to add to that that's the way I've always thrived as a leader, is to get feedback day in and day out. I always ask either my peers, my team, or my manager, hey, how am I doing? Am I doing good? That's the only way I know if I'm going the right direction or not. I don't know how your experience is with feedback.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so important is I think one of the keys of feedback is what you just said. you will never get great feedback from people voluntarily on a consistent basis. And what you just said, Cameron, is perfectly kind of transitions into that next point of really saying we have to ask for feedback. In fact, I like to word it a different way of saying, we have to give someone permission to give us feedback, because I don't know about you, Cameron, but I often feel sometimes uncomfortable offering feedback to someone unless I know they really want it. In fact, I'll say this, if someone is brave enough to walk up to you and provide you feedback unsolicited, you really better listen, because that's an extremely gutsy and brave move that they've made, and they've took a risk with you, especially if you're their boss or superior, or you're the person in charge. And if someone is willing to take that risk to provide you that feedback, I really suggest that you listen to what they have to say. And then after that, it's really, we really transition from this. We ask for people, we ask for the feedback, and then we move into this idea of leaders should always be looking from feedback from multiple sources. Don't take all your feedback from one person or from one specific group. Seek feedback from multiple people. You don't want to link it down to where you're only getting your feedback from one or two people. Make sure you're getting feedback from a multitude of people, because if you're only getting it from just small groups of people or one or two people, that feedback can sometimes be biased, or it could be not very the full picture of what you want to see. So you want to have a very vast group of people who provide you feedback, and then you can kind of build your growth plans and how you want to kind of change the way you do things, to make yourself better. The next thing you really want to talk about is look and listen carefully as possible when people provide you this kind of feedback. You want to ask yourself questions like, is this a fact or an opinion? This is very important when somebody's providing you feedback. Cameron, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, but it's very important to understand when someone's giving you a feedback that is a fact, that is something that is 100% certainly true, or is someone giving you their opinion in their feedback.
Yeah, and also with that, sometimes team members like beating around the bush. They don't like telling you exactly what the feedback is. They kind of beat around the bush just to give it to you in a soft manner. So it's important to listen for those details and see what the underlying reason is for that feedback, or what the actual feedback, what they're actually trying to tell you. I'm experiencing this right now, being a new environment where team members are giving me hints of different things to look at, being new to the work environment. And it's so critical to when you hear something like, okay, I need to look into that and do something about it. Not just listen to it, but do something about it. And when you do something about that feedback, that's when you start earning trust and credibility with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it just kind of piggyback off what you just said. You really want to ask that question is, what is the intentions behind the feedback that's being provided? So, why is this feedback being given? So if it is a subordinate or a team member on your team that's providing you this feedback, once you kind of get past that, is this a fact or an opinion piece of feedback? And then you kind of transition into that feedback of, why is this being given? Is it given from a state of duress? Is it given from a state of frustration? Or what is the why around this feedback? After you've kind of received the feedback, and now that you're at this point of trying to internalize the feedback and bring it back and actually try to do something constructive with it, you really want to take some time to process your emotions. Our feelings at first can sometimes affect us really in a negative way, especially if the initial feedback was not positive. So we really need to kind of check our emotions at the door kind of mentality. We need to acknowledge the fact that our emotions are sometimes going to play a very biased role in our ability to decipher and to make a decision on the feedback. So we want to make sure that we are acknowledging that piece and that we're calculating that in our decision making. And finally, we want to ask ourselves, what do I feel, what do I think, and what do I know? And this is when you start taking feedback. And really, for me, if I get a good piece of feedback, I often will write it down and I will begin to try to reflect on it and see where it fits into my how it fits into my life. Cameron, you got anything else you want to add?
Yeah, with the emotions, as leaders, as soon as we receive negative feedback, we get defensive. We may get defensive internally and hopefully not externally, but that's our first reaction. And it's so important for us as leaders is to put ourselves in check for our emotions, because we don't want to be, have an outrageous reaction in front of our team, because our team is looking how we react based upon that feedback that we receive. Are you going to be someone that goes on the rampage with our team, retaliate amongst maybe the person that gave you that feedback? If you take time to process your emotions and take that feedback as something positive, it's something to help you improve your team, and then you actually do something about it, your team is going to respect you more and be able to consistently provide that feedback. And I hope it goes both ways. And I know we're going to talk about that later on. And, we always have something to learn in leadership. We're not going to be always the know-it-all leader. We're not going to be the one that has all the answers. We're always learning about our own leadership. And we continue to evolve in leading our teams based on feedback. That's how we thrive as leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's kind of chat for just a few minutes, because, we talk about this idea of constructive criticisms or kind of a negative feedback. What do we do when we have negative feedback? And really, the question I want to kind of ask us now is how do we know the difference between constructive criticism and destructive criticism? And, I think I want to really just kind of preface this is that our ability to accept feedback, especially when it's negative, is going to be solely based on our attitude, the attitude we possess when we're getting feedback. And I want to say a couple things here. You're going to have people who are going to provide you feedback. Let's call them the critic, right? You're always going to have somebody who doesn't want to. They're always going to be critical to you. They're always going to be saying things that are maybe negative towards you. And you know what? Those kinds of people, we need to be able to know who they are, and we need to take that criticism at kind of an arm's length, right? But here's my suggestion: is don't. I want to be careful. I say this. Don't feel like you have to respond to every criticism you get. Often in our culture today, even in our political landscape we're in now, we're in this mindset of every negative thing that is said about me, every piece of negative feedback I get, I feel that I have to respond in some sort of, I have to respond to that negative criticism. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just take the criticism and be quiet. That's just, I think that's very important for us to note at this point. You're going to have people who provide you negative criticism, and it's not going to be healthy, but it's also not healthy to get in a back and forth battle with those kinds of people as well. So just take it for what it is and move on. But what is constructive criticism? Constructive criticism is not about devaluing people. When we receive constructive criticism, it should never be from the person providing you that feedback should never try to devalue you. It always values the person. It's all about improvement. It's all about reaching goals, and it should always be towards a goal of positive change. Cameron, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I really like with the negative feedback, whether it's constructive or destructive, it's so important to, like you mentioned earlier, rise above. And that can be so challenging as a leader, because sometimes we get this feedback that, it really hurts us. And sometimes we do take it personal, even though we try hard to not take it personal. Rising above that feedback and actually doing something about it. When you talk about constructive criticism, what is it? It's something that's going to help you as a leader and create that positive change and get your team and work environment better.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we begin to kind of wrap this whole talk up, a couple of things that that I've came away in my career that I think that helps feedback flow back and forth in your business or in your organization, or whether it's maybe even in your family, is this really goes back to this idea that we have to give permission to people around us to provide feedback. So once you've given that permission, I always encourage you, especially if you're in a company business atmospheres, always have an open ear policy. That means you're creating a culture of openness. You're creating this culture where people feel comfortable approaching you and bringing their concerns to you. The second thing, and this is something that I've really started to work on in the last year, is don't assume. Ask questions. Never assume anything. Never assume any circumstances. Just ask questions and kind of dig into what's really going on. Seek people's perspective. Seek to understand. Seek to truly understand the circumstances. And when it really comes down to it, positive feedback confirms your performance. Negative feedback connects you and makes things right. So that's what it's all about. Positive feedback, it confirms that you're on the right track. Negative feedback lets you know, it connects you, and lets you know, here's the adjustments you need to make to be on the right track. Cameron, we've been running for about 20 minutes. So final thoughts?
No, I really like your point regarding having that open dialogue on feedback. It goes both ways with your team and others around you. Once you have that comfortable open dialogue and seek feedback both ways, you look for opportunities for improving yourselves and the team. And that's what it's really all about, is helping everyone get better. Oh, I remember that quote. It's when the leader gets better, everyone gets better.
There it is.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I don't have anything else for this. So you want to end us out?
Yeah. So thank you for listening in on talking about feedback. We'll catch you next time on the Leadership Download.
Take care.